Who better? Nobody, to talk about the situation in the Persian Gulf, the danger of war, either from the US or Israel or both, the preparations being made by the Iranian people and their leadership to defend their country and their revolution, than Professor Said Mohammad Marandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran. Professor, so happy to see you, and so happy that the rockets and missiles are not yet flying. But is the danger over, or is Trump planning some kind of sneak attack, or Netanyahu some kind of sneak attack? What's your take on it?
Well, thank you very much, George, for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure. No one knows, especially now with the files that have been released on Epstein. Some believe that that may increase the chances for a great war of distraction, and therefore the country and the government is preparing for the worst, as it has been for the last few weeks. We don't know where things will go, but what is clear is that the leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has said today that any attack on Iran will lead to a regional war. And over the past few days and last couple of weeks, Iranian leaders and military officials have said that even a small attack, a symbolic attack by the United States, will mean an all-out war, because it is clear that that would be an act of aggression, and if Iran does not respond to it with massive force, it will only encourage Trump to do it again at a later date. The 12-day war is not over, and Trump back then was also deceitful. He was negotiating with Iran, but at the same time conspiring with Netanyahu against the country. And more recently, we saw Western intelligence agencies create an armed uprising in the country. While Western media was lying and claiming that this was all peaceful protests, it was clear from the footage and from the admissions of the Mossad in a Persian language statement from the former CIA chief that Mossad was on the streets. And Channel 14 News of the Israeli regime also said that they brought in weapons, and this channel is close to Netanyahu. They brought in weapons that they said killed hundreds of security officials and police officers. So when we look at that, and we also look at how the US Secretary of Treasury at Davos gloated and said, I brought down the Iranian currency, and you put these all together, it was obviously a conspiracy against the country. So when you put all these together, the 12-day war, the conspiracy that we had a few weeks ago, and then the media buildup, trying to create a consensus to attack Iran by manufacturing fake numbers about the casualties, even though it is the West that's responsible for what happened in Iran. But manufacturing fake numbers and pretending that these were peaceful protests, it's clear that the liberal media, the conservative media, the Epstein class media, and the Epstein class politicians, whether the likes of Levin or AOC, they are pushing for war. So Iran has to be prepared for the worst, but hopefully the situation inside the United States, the issues arising from the Epstein files, and the global situation will act as a means to prevent the United States from doing what would be the most catastrophic mistake in contemporary human history. The Iranians have prepared for war. If the US attacks, there will no longer be any oil and gas coming from the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Peninsula, or the Caucasus, especially since these tiny Arab states, Arab dictatorships in the Persian Gulf region are conspiring with the West. They host their bases, and as we speak, the U.S. is using those bases. And the same is true with the Aliyev regime in Azerbaijan, who is a close ally of the Israeli regime and who was cooperating with the Israeli regime during the 12-day war. So if there is war, and God forbid, none of us want war, these regimes will be swept away. And the price of oil and gas will go through the roof. And the global economy will collapse. And it will be the fault of the United States, Trump, Zionists, and all those elites that were pushing for war, and people will remember that. So hopefully, sane people will warn the Trump regime against war. But then again, the people around Trump, the people who control the Congress and the Senate, they're not American firsters. They're Israeli firsters. And they're willing to sacrifice the United States, the well-being of people across the world, across the West, for the sake of the Israeli regime. So who knows?
What's the current disposition of American forces? Trump is always blowing hard about his armada and how beautifully it's sailing. But from what I can see, and I'm not a general, but from what I can see, there was never enough American forces to make a serious attempt at regime change in Iran present in the Gulf, even in these bases situated in the American satrapies in the Arab countries around you. And the Eisenhower is said to have left the area and headed for the Indian Ocean. Are you in a position to talk about what military resources Trump actually has there in any case?
Well, it is a fact that in countries like Qatar and other regimes in the Persian Gulf region, they are putting up more anti-missile systems in order to prevent Iran from retaliating against aggression. But they do not have the capability to win a war against Iran. George, this is something that your viewers have to remember. Iran, when the Israeli regime attacked Iran, with US and the support of the West and regional regimes, because the US military bases in Turkey and the Persian Gulf were all used to help the United States and the Israelis against Iran. Back then, Iran defeated the Israeli regime, even though it was attacked and there was a blitzkrieg attack that killed a lot of commanders during the first few hours. But ultimately, it was the Israeli regime that sought a ceasefire. This is well known. Steve Bannon, who was the first chief of staff of Trump during his first term, he said so. He said that the real story in this war is during the last few days of the war, the Israeli regime was being hammered and they needed a ceasefire. Iran's military capabilities that led to the defeat of the Israeli regime, that is a sideshow for Iran. Iran's real capabilities are directed towards the United States and the Persian Gulf. Why? Because ever since 9/11 and the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, the Iranians have been preparing themselves for an eventual US attack, especially since Bush and Obama and others were all saying all options were on the table. So Iran has built a host, many hundreds of underground bases, not with those long-range missiles that were fired towards the Israeli regime, but with medium and short-range missiles and drones that can strike anywhere in the Persian Gulf, the other side of the Persian Gulf, outside of the Strait of Hormuz and inside the Strait of Hormuz. That's in addition to the long-range missiles. Then you also have the anti-ship missile systems that Iran has. And they are all pointed at the Persian Gulf right now. So if there is war, those regimes that are complicit, those regimes that host US bases, and as we speak, those bases are active, they should not expect to have any more oil or gas facilities or tankers moving or oil flowing through pipelines to the Red Sea or from the Caucasus, because they're complicit. They are all guilty. Iran does not want war, George. Iran does not want the global economy to be damaged. Iran is sitting back, waiting for the United States to make a decision. But if the United States and if Trump makes the stupid decision of attacking Iran, this will be a fight for survival. And all those regimes that are complicit, they will be swept away. Qatar, the Emirates, others, these regimes are family dictatorships. There are more foreigners, far more foreigners in their countries than passport holders. And these family dictatorships won't last. So the smart thing to do is for the United States to back off. But if they choose otherwise, then I think we will be living in a very different world than the world that we're living in today. The potential consequences for a war in the Persian Gulf region are far greater than anything we've seen in Ukraine.
I fear you're right. Now, Trump keeps trumpeting about a deal, and he keeps restating that this deal must be that Iran does not produce nuclear weapons. There's two problems with that. Three, actually. First of all, they had a nuclear deal with the P5+1, and Trump withdrew the United States from it. Secondly, Iran says it does not have a nuclear weapon, does not intend to have a nuclear weapon, and in the right circumstances, the IAEA and the other governing bodies that govern these matters all testified as such. And the third is that the demand, which has, by the way, been just echoed by Keir Starmer earlier today, Iran must not have nuclear weapons. But if that's their only demand, you can satisfy that right now. You can right now say, you're right, we're not going to have a nuclear weapon. Now call the whole thing off. But that's not really what they're demanding, is it?
Well, George, Trump has been saying different things on different days. First, he was talking about the so-called protesters, and he was telling them to take the buildings and take institutions, and that help is coming. And he was encouraging them to push for more greater death and destruction. Then he said that both sides are shooting when he wanted to back down the first time. Then they made demands that Iran has to give up its missile defense system so that the Israeli regime and the United States could bomb Iran whenever they want. He said that it must give up its nuclear program, and then must give up its allies across the region. The US can keep its ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Zionism and the Epstein class that rules over parts of our region, but the Iranians cannot support the heroes in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Iraq, Yemen, and elsewhere. Iran is not going to accept any of these. However, if we take what Trump is now saying at face value, if we believe that, and of course we can't trust him because we negotiated last time, and during the negotiations, he was conspiring against us. But Iran, this may be an opportunity to give him a chance to back down and pretend that he had some sort of a success. Remember, this is exactly what happened in Yemen. When they waged a war against Ansarullah, these heroes of Yemen, he said he's going to destroy them. His ridiculous minister of war, secretary of war, said that he's going to demolish them. And after a month, he said Ansarullah, or the Houthis as they like to call them, they gave up. But the reality, of course, was that he gave up. And he walked away, but pretended that he won. If that is what he wants, that is possible. But Iran doesn't trust the regime in Washington because they lie all the time. And the Epstein files shows what Iran is dealing with. These are creatures that are so evil that they're beyond our comprehension. So Iran is not going to let down its guard. it is a possibility that Trump is seeking a way out. If that is the case, Iran will provide a route for him to escape. But Iran is not going to give up its sovereignty. And you're absolutely correct. We had a nuclear deal, and it wasn't an ideal deal for Iran. And if there is going to be a deal in future, Iran is going to make sure it's better than what existed beforehand. Iran is in a strong position, not just Iran. Yesterday, we saw the first footage of underground missile sites of the resistance in Iraq. In Yemen, the resistance has been building up. The same is true in Lebanon. There will be a regional war that the United States cannot win. It will be defeated. The new Iraqi government and the elections that we saw in Iraq, the supporters of the resistance won that election. The United States is in serious trouble. So the best thing for Trump to do is to back off. Iran does not want war. Iran does not want people to suffer anywhere in the world. But the decision will be made in Washington. And we're dealing with really sinister people. It's not just Epstein files. We saw what they did to Syria. We saw how they used ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And they used the same sort of ISIS and Al-Qaeda tactics during the violent military attacks in Iran during the last few weeks. We cannot trust these people. And one of the things, by the way, George, I wanted to point out, which is not directly linked to this. You have been forced into exile because of your views. The United States and the Europeans have been supporting ISIS and Al-Qaeda in our region. And they brought them to power in Syria. There are a lot of people who supposedly in your country who were supporters of who said they were supporters of the resistance, of Hamas at least. And they boasted of being in contact with the political wing of Hamas and having influence over them. Why is it that these people still live in the UK? They still have their influence. They still carry out political activities. And you are an exile. It's because the British regime and the American regime, they are controlling these groups, these terrorists, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, their supporters, their enablers, across the region and beyond. Iran cannot trust the United States, the UK, France, or the Germans or anyone else in the EU, the Canadians or the Australians, because they support Zionism, they support ISIS, they support Al-Qaeda, and if they have the opportunity, they will demolish Iran. So the only path left for Iran is to be ready for war, but hope for peace.
Amen to that. He said that he had already destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities. What happened to that boast? And why does nobody say? You told us you already obliterated it just last year.
George, the Western media will never ask any question. Just as during the last couple of days we saw dozens of Palestinians slaughtered in one day, and the Western media is looking away. The Epstein files should bring down government after government across the Western world. Yeah. But it doesn't, because the Western media won't ask questions. The Western media belongs to the Epstein class. So, yes, you're right. Trump said he obliterated the Iranian nuclear program. But now, months later, he's saying that it has to be destroyed. Everything that the U.S. says is full of contradictions. And the Western media will not show it, just as the Western media will not tell its people that Al-Qaeda, who we're told carried out 9/11, is now a friend of the West in Syria.
Now, with your previous hat, Professor, you were Professor of American Studies, so I know you haven't lost your interest in American politics. As you survey the American scene right now, the state of chaos, instability, depravity, degeneracy, the state of the political media and business class has never, ever been lower in the entire history of the United States. Don't you think something has to give? Trump just can't go on making wars, threatening wars, wagging the dog to try forlornly to divert people's attention from what's being revealed about their own country. How do you see that American political scene now?
Well, again, this is something that you know better than I. But I think one of the things that really fascinates me is MAGA and how these people were anti-war and now they're supporting war. They apparently have no problem with shooting white women in the face anymore, or shooting men who take care of war veterans or veterans of the armed services. They used to apparently care about Epstein and the Epstein files, but apparently for Christian Zionists, that's okay now. It's quite extraordinary at many levels, although it shouldn't be in many ways. It shouldn't surprise us because Christian Zionists believe that Christ supports genocide. So they obviously, for me, could support a pedophile in power. I think that the situation in the United States is unsustainable, though, and that people are waking up, young people, Jews, Christians, Muslims, people from all walks of life. They're waking up. And even though the regime is trying to turn people against one another, I think people on the left and the right and independents are all seeing the truth. And so I'm not pessimistic about the future, although I don't see any imminent change for a better political landscape in the United States. But I think that this awakening is something that can provide hope for the future, and we must push forward. And people like yourself are at the forefront of this change. And therefore, even though the situation looks hopeless, the Senate, the House, more important than the Senate and the House and the White House, is the fact that the real rulers of the United States are the Epstein class, the oligarchs, the absolutely and utterly corrupt oligarchs. And they are the permanent leaders. They are leaders for life. But people see through what's going on. We have seen that in TikTok, for example, how people are fleeing TikTok because they see what has happened. They see what's happening to their societies. So I'm not pessimistic at all, actually. And I advise your viewers to be optimistic, despite I did read some of I didn't read them, but I listened to people who were explaining some of the Epstein files and some of the documents, and they were showing the documents in their video programs, and it was really sickening. It was very disgusting, and it was difficult to watch, and a couple of times I just stopped listening to their explanations. But all that, I think that at the end of the day, this corruption, this despicable ruling class with all its wealth and power, they're in serious trouble. And if they do push for conflict with Iran, they will lose. And that will quicken their demise. And I don't think that they're going to succeed in Venezuela either, by the way, even though they're stealing the country's resources and acting like a 19th century colonial regime. But I think the reach of these oligarchs is not as great as they think it is. And I think in the coming months, it's going to get worse for the United States, or at least the regime.
I've spent my whole life, from the age of 14, and I'm 71, struggling against American imperialism, struggling against the political and economic system that they are the apex of. And I always knew that they were rotten. But I never imagined that they were as rotten as they are now revealed to be. In fact, I chide myself for my naivety. And it's all parties, both parties, Republican and Democrat. It's not just President Trump. It's President Biden. It's President Clinton. It's President even George Bush the First, for God's sake. The level of rottenness, the stench that you can almost smell from the page, from the screen, when you are reading this kind of thing, is beyond belief, stretching from human sacrifice to all kinds of sexual degeneracy. Had you, as a professor of American studies, any idea just how evil? These are human serpents, aren't they?
Well, you know, George, actually, I was speaking to a mutual friend of ours just today, and I was telling him sort of the same thing. Even though we've been watching them carry out a genocide in Gaza, for an ongoing genocide in Gaza for well over 2 years, and the entire Western media looks away, and the political class rearms the Israeli regime, so we shouldn't be surprised. But it is shocking even for me. If it's shocking for you, it's definitely shocking for me. It's so ugly and disgraceful and disgusting that I was telling our mutual friend that it reminds me of those low-budget films that I used to watch as a child, black and white films where the antagonist is, his evilness is exaggerated, and the film doesn't even look real. These people are so disgraceful and so disgusting that it's difficult to believe that they could do such things. But, George, one really good thing, and this is what I was telling our mutual friend, that I believe comes out of these documents, is that it does, I think, show that in the FBI, there are people who want this stuff to get out. I don't think it's all just sloppiness that some of these documents came out and information that wasn't supposed to be leaked got leaked. I think there are people in the FBI who are actually conspiring to find a way to get this material leaked, to fool the people at the top of the FBI so that people can see more than what they were supposed to see. Because the way in which these documents came out, of course, it's clear that most of the real information is still hidden from the people of the United States and the people of the world. But some things have been revealed that should have been stopped and blocked by these people, and they would have understood that it should not have come out. But it did. And I think that shows that there's something happening in the FBI. And I think that it shows that there are decent people at the lower levels of government who are doing what they can to expose this corruption. I can't say this for sure. I'm not an expert, but it just feels that what we are seeing is, and what has been accidentally revealed, is more than just sloppiness.
Finally, I mean, it turns out that Epstein was a pretty important guy, right? It's clear that his reach was simply enormous across the world, from the former Israeli Prime Minister and head of Mossad, Ehud Barak, to members of the British royal family, the Swedish royal family, the Norwegian royal family, to Zelensky in Ukraine. Turns out he was there just months before Zelensky's election, and he wrote to all kinds of important people about the great opportunities that were opening up in Ukraine with the election of Zelensky. He was conspiring with people to to assassinate and overthrow President Putin. He was involved in Somaliland. Can you believe it? Who even knew, other than thee and me, about Somaliland outside of the Horn of Africa? But Jeffrey Epstein was there. He was a friend of Chomsky and Woody Allen. He was really deeply central to the operation of the system. It's beyond comprehension or belief that he was not working for someone, unless he was the man, unless he was the someone, and everyone else was working for him, which seems unlikely. Who was he really working for?
Well, I think that's the question that no one in the mainstream media is talking about. Even in the United States, now that they are talking about Epstein, they're not talking about the real question, and that is the relationship between Epstein and the Israeli regime. And how is it that the Israeli regime can do whatever it wants in the United States? It controls the United States. And I have no doubt that Epstein is just one of many Epsteins. In fact, George, in Iran, some of these people who were recruited by the Mossad and Western intelligence agencies, they were recruited through parties, and these people were filmed, and then they were forced to do what these corrupt foreign intelligence agencies wanted them to do. And my biggest concern is that the supporters of the Palestinian people, opponents of this criminal empire, that they are plotting the same thing for a lot of these people. So your viewers, activists, they should all be very careful about their cell phones. They should be very careful about agents from the FBI or people put close to them from Mossad who want to push them to do something illegal or foolish so that they can make them change their position or to conspire on their behalf or to spy on their behalf. These are really evil and sinister people. It is so lawless that the United States, the superpower, the number one, at least the former number one superpower, I think China's economy is, you've been to China and you know what I'm talking about. I think China is now pulling ahead of the United States. They're building their country as the United States is engaging in war and conflict across the world. But this superpower is allowing a tiny Zionist regime to do whatever it wants in their country, to use sex slaves and children, to force people to do what they want them to do, whether they're politicians or whether they're business people. It is quite extraordinary. The most, of course, the worst part of it all for me, in a way, not the worst part, but what is disappointing for me is Chomsky in all this. Although there's no reason to believe that he did any of the disgusting things that the others have done. But although I disagree with quite a few things with Chomsky about Iran and the axis of resistance, but I grew up reading Chomsky, and when I was a part of the anti-war movement in the UK, when I was a PhD student, and I was one of the people listening to your speech in Hyde Park, at that time I was reading Chomsky, and it's very sad for me. It's a small footnote in all this, but it's very sad for me to see that his name is involved in all this.
Cash and compromat. I suspect in his case it was the cash, but who can rule out the compromat? Professor Syed Mohammed Marandi, a masterful exposition and coverage of the entire subject and the entire scheme of things. And we must pray that war will not break out, But we pray also that if it does, if Iran is attacked, that God protects you all and makes justice prevail.